Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Hello, Amanda. Hello, Jesse. Hi. So welcome. So I guess this week we didn't have any cognition futures meeting nor cybernetics meeting. I think we'll move the cybernetics meeting to every 2 weeks like we were doing before. I discussed it with Amanda. And and then Diva Worm, we had a pretty good meeting. That is online, so you can check that out. We did a couple of overviews of different topics, so it should be interesting. So, any updates?
I was mainly commenting on that I need my glasses to read anything. That's
Jesse says he'll say more in a few minutes. Okay. So why don't we start with some of the activities that have been going on recently. So we're starting off the year, or calls for activities, I guess. So we're starting off the year with some interesting things going on. So the first thing is this MIT reality hack. So this is an event that is happening, I guess, this weekend at MIT. This is like a hackathon where people are playing with different tools and trying to build things in XR. I know that Hussein is actually at this event, so that's great. So this is a community-run XR hackathon held at MIT and co-hosted by a team of community volunteers. The Reality Hack organization runs this. This is a 501c3, and this is a student organization. Actually, the Reality Hack, I guess, is a student organization at MIT. So they share a common goal of educating, empowering, and enabling people to be part of the XR industry. So that's their goal. They have a code of conduct. They have a schedule here, which is all the things that they're doing. So they have a number of workshops. They have an inspiration expo. They have team formation. So at a hackathon, you go through some initial talks, and then you form a team, and you do some things, and then you report back at the end to show what you've done. So the workshops are. I was looking at the workshops earlier, and they're interesting. They have all sorts of different topics here. One of them is how to hackathon, thinking through my project's tech stack. So they kind of mention how to do this process. Getting started with Meta Presence platform. Some working in a team or team building, skill building here. What can I do with these design skills? Spatial audio, which is a topic in XR that's very important for kind of placing audio in the world and placing audio in your virtual world. Then other topics, wireframing, spatial audio 2, augmented reality made easy with Snapdragon Spaces, so using tools for different things. They have a little workshop on Git, actually. I found that interesting. XR Interaction Toolkit in Unity, Niantic, Leia SR, that's interesting. Animation and rigging, so teaching techniques, how to create content, and rapid prototyping. So they're working with Arduino. So there are a lot of different things that they're doing, and then the ideas that can lead you into new directions after you leave the hackathon. So and then past projects in 2023. Let's see if they have what they have in this. So I guess they've had a lot of different past projects. So they have this one, technology horizons for human interfaces. This is where we have these 6 degree of freedom headsets and controllers. This is basically the standard for head-mounted display devices, and kind of thinking about how to design human interfaces for this kind of a paradigm. Then they have one on WebXR, best use of Snapdragon spaces. So this is a platform that what can you build with it? What's the best kind of use for it? Best use of an ArcGIS map, and this is ArcGIS Maps SDK. So this is a tool that you would use to bring geographic data into a virtual world. How can you best use that? So there are a lot of these where you have a tool, where you have a concept. This one, hardware interfacing with the human body. Humans are squishy and they're all slightly different sizes. It's a really big challenge to make hardware that interfaces the human bodies, but a really rewarding one. Haptics, inputs galore. The team that does this best wins the prize. So again, it's like, you give people these goals and they kind of come up with creative solutions for them. That's kind of the spirit of a hackathon. So,
it looks great. Still, be interesting to see how the Apple headset goes.
Oh yeah.
in terms of sales, and in terms of still just doesn't seem to have found its killer app.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what year this was. I'm gonna guess like 2017. Anyway, there's a French conference called Viva Tech, and like a lot of in-person conferences, I don't know how it's fared after the pandemic, but it was a really great venue for all sorts of technology in applications, right? So it was very much like the French trying to show off like how to use IoT in this range of this range of industries. How to use new medical sensors in this range of application. VR. And there was lots of examples, again, by large corporations trying to use it in factories. This was more AR, right? So giving people access to manuals and wiring information, like you could some of the these possibilities, right? These weren't actual fit projects in use, but these were like imagined uses. And it came out because Biopunk Society sent out something about wouldn't it be cool to give people AR to perform to basically carry out protocols. You got these complex lab protocols, so basically be giving people all the instructions while they're doing it, like, hey, here's where the reagents are for this thing, grab that, put them in this machine, here's how to do these things, with this like I hate the example, but with this like Terminator like interface, right?
Right.
Like it's all coming up on the sides in the window, and the French had this, like, where you were putting together an Airbus plane, right? It's this amazingly complex factory manufacturing, and anyway, I still haven't seen that in action. You know what I mean? Like that hasn't taken over any factory floors that I know of.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, not exactly actively out there seeking these, but again, like I saw those possibilities. It made sense.
Right. Yeah.
and as well as the massive military. What was the Xbox? The Microsoft headset, Halo. Anyway, HoloLens. Thank you. And anyway, they had a potential DoD contract in the billions, 30 billion or something like that. Certainly tens. And anyway, it was canceled.
Right.
Or at last I heard that they had, and that had actually gone out into trials and things. Or they really put those on soldiers and tried to have them run around with them, knock them around, and get feed them information and see how useful it was. Anyway, I've just it just seems like every couple of years it comes back with somehow we can make this work, but it just hasn't found that hasn't gotten traction on something.
Yeah, it's always been the way, actually. I mean, you've always had it's been very demo heavy, the history of XR or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of it has been based on demos, but having really strong adoption outside of people interested in demos has been a little bit limited.
Right. It does. I mean, and I forget, you or Jesse sent around the immersive initiative at UIUC.
Oh yeah,
and that also just I mean, it's cool, and it definitely does involve, or I can see their statement about the multidisciplinarity and things like that. It absolutely reminds me of the cave initiatives.
Right. The cave.
Yeah. So again, back in my hometown area of Virginia Tech, I think they've still got their cave from 20 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Right. And again, I don't think it's ever found, other than demos, I don't think it's ever found humans are better at taking in this, taking in information somehow. Certainly kind of losing yourself. I think I still think it's good for psychology experiments.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that's that should be its primary use. You have experimental control over a person's environment.
Yeah. So yeah, I remember. Yeah, I don't know if they still have caves or not, but yeah, I don't know if they still have caves or not, but yeah, I remember that.
Right. I'm dating myself with the cave VR.
Well, I mean, yeah, but there's something to be said about that. It's we think maybe, I mean, there's been kind of this focus on putting on a headset and things like that, but maybe it is, especially now with the kind of displays we have and some of the spatial audio advances. So I don't know, maybe caves will make a comeback for some reason.
Sure. But it's but I almost don't. Again, unless it's for specifically giving the person this real world experience,
right?
Which I the only application I see is basically cognitive neuroscientists.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, people don't maybe know so much about surgical robots and the use of technology in surgery and specific, certainly in brain surgery. I mean, these systems already cost a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
So throwing on, VR or throwing on like basically to do these surgeries remotely. Again, that seems like a potential use case where it's like you're really giving somebody with expertise kind of, a telepresence. But that's very niche application, seems like.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about all the different ways in which you could use this technology, and whether it's. I mean, there have been a lot of like kind of approaches that have kind of focused on niche users, but like making that or making adoption a little bit broader, thinking about the use cases that would be a little bit broader. So, like, what's interesting about some of the stuff that they've done on MetaQuest is one of the things they found an interest in is exercise apps. Like, and people didn't think about this, and maybe it's enabled by advances in tracking, but, being able to do exercise, different types of physical activity in a headset. And, there's still some problems with it, but it seemed to have found some popularity. So
yeah, I mean, here in San Francisco, we've got those downtown, and they advertise outside. Inside VR. I'm curious how much they're used. It does seem like something as a physical training device. Certainly, like at least with the original, or we started using the is it the Vive?
Yeah.
HTC Vive. Yeah.
Yeah.
We started using the Vive because it had the multiple cameras and multiple. It was doing the motion capture.
Yeah.
Best, or at least for ostensibly a consumer system. And that would seem to be a great way to do kind of give yourself an e-trainer,
All right.
like somebody who's watching you perform these things, and then potentially giving you feedback.
Yeah.
And there was somebody with Neurotech X San Francisco who's doing this or his focus was on e-gaming, and I've seen it. I've seen some videos where they're training people, and basically with this kind of equipment, and like again, it seems a lot like cognitive experiments, where you're really just testing their reaction time and things like that. It was some of those that when it came up, I forget what the context was, but I think they're asking about like finding super reactors, or like people who have abnormally fast perceptual or motor abilities. It was seeing those e-game tests that it just made me wonder. They must do the same thing or they must be thinking about doing the same things for like fighter pilots and things like that, where you need super fast. You'd want people who had the best kind of hardware, so to speak.
Yeah. I think people have done this with like. Well, I don't know. Maybe people haven't done this exact thing, but like
I honestly wasn't sure. I mean, I remember what was that movie where showing all the astronaut testing.
Right.
Like, and it was comprehensive to the point of ridiculousness, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what they. I mean, I'm sure they've got certain cutoffs, but I don't know if they really found like bimodal distributions in in reaction time or perceptual abilities. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was bimodal, or whether there was just like essentially a cutoff of something like a Gaussian or Poisson.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just taking some notes here. Yeah, this is an interesting thing. I'm trying to think of.
And I'm not sure who to ask.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to look up after the meeting. I think I have an idea maybe where to look, but
Okay.
I can't get my mind on it right now. So, but I know people have done things like not exactly what you're talking about, but like, doing training and then trying to get a sense of like, what the performance curve is or what the learning curve is and so forth. And so that would be like the first step in finding like super people with super abilities, I guess. But yeah.
Because I think I told you about the IARPA challenge from like 2017. So this is like not DARPA, but like I forget who runs this. It's like Homeland Security. I forget, but it's like not DoD, but like intelligence. I think the I is to intelligence. But they had this, and because it was run out of UIUC, and it was kind of about, their focus was on can we improve people's sensory motor reactivity.
Right.
Like they gave them a visual motor task, and then there was like one group that was training and another group that was training plus brain stimulation or something like that. And yeah, I think I've still got the data sets from that.
Well, you do have data sets, really.
Yeah. And again, it was yeah. I'd have to dig up. I've still got the Slack channel.
Oh, okay.
I wonder, at this point, whether, I guess all the messages are hidden.
Oh, of course.
Well, we'll see, because it was what was that kind of government scientific contractor, Charles River.
Okay.
I think Charles River was running it.
All right.
So maybe they had a paid account.
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah. Why don't you find that?
I definitely have that. Yeah, because IEEE Brain was also running that.
All
oh,
right.
Cool. Yeah, that would be awesome if you join us.
IEEE Brain. Okay.
Yeah, IEEE Brain and Charles River, and I don't. And then I know it was like UIUC people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I'm honestly forgetting what departments they were in.
Yeah. Well, that's great if you could find some of the stuff. Yeah, we could maybe think about it a little bit. There's definitely something interesting though to kind of revisit.
Yep, here it is. Yeah, IEEE Brain Boston.
Oh, okay.
Well, this is just the old Slack.
Oh, okay.
I'll pull that up.
Okay.
But it is it's interesting. I mean, I kind of feel like we should know where to find large scale studies of people's perceptual motor system performance.
Yeah.
Because certainly we do this all the time in terms of diffusion drift modeling of reaction times to separate groups or to look at different performance task performance between groups, experimental groups, or old, young.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing, yeah, and we can revisit this later, but the other thing I wanted to get to here was the Embodied Intelligence Conference for 2024. So this just came out the other day. I know Jesse and Morgan posted on this in the Slack, so I didn't get the original email, but the website is now.
It was buried in my not inbox. It was a very strange update. It wasn't a strange update, but I'm glad I saw it because I could have easily missed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it looks like it's here.
Good.
So that's good.
So this is the Embodied Intelligence online conference. This is all online. And it's going to be March 20th through 22nd, which I think is like a Wednesday through a Friday. And then this is a free event, so we can, I guess, register. Each person who registers can submit an abstract. So we can do this strategically, like we did we used to do for NeuroMatch. We did this last year for Embodied Intelligence. And so we have a bunch of invited speakers already. So yeah, this should be good. They always have invited speakers, and then they have the breakout sessions, which are people's work that they want to present. So I don't think there's anything really to say yet about it, except that we should strategize for this, kind of come up with what we want to talk about, and then submit our abstracts, and then organize our talks and things like that. If we go back to the list of things that they want to cover here, so we want to use this conference to answer some of the key open questions relating to EI. This includes, but is not limited to, what is embodied intelligence? How does computation come about from embodiment? So we've talked about those things. How does language emerge? So, that's not necessarily our wheelhouse, but how do we understand intelligence? In what theories do we have to represent it? What are the common currencies? And by that, I think they mean what are the common measures, or what are the common terms, or whatever. I mean, you're dealing with roboticists, philosophers, and, machine learning people and cognitive scientists. So we have a very diverse group of people who are interested in it, and they want to find sort of commonalities across those fields.
Is it fields, or is it like different, your different abilities?
Well, I think people come from different fields that they want to, and they have different research questions they want to ask. So it's I might want to know a very specific set of tasks to look at embodiment and robotics versus a very philosophical view of embodiment. And last year we had one talk was our large language models embodied, and then there was this whole debate, but it was a very, very philosophical point of view, which is different than if AI person was asking the same question, because it's a different set of things that they think about on a daily basis. So it's a very but then how do you kind of understand this in a common way?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is, and then let's see. So how can we measure complexity? So that's another question. What cannot be done by computational intelligence? I guess what they mean by that is what is embodied intelligence, what is computational intelligence, and what is not, I guess is the but that's, and then what ethical questions arise from EI. So again, there are a lot of things you can focus our submissions on, those questions. I think that would make sense. But other than that, I mean, it's looking forward to it. I know there's a quick turnaround because let's see, it's already almost the end of January, so it's probably less than 2 months.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of already here that the first quarter rush is here, because now it's Embodied Intelligence Conference. CogSci is due very quickly, which I'll cover next, and at the very least I'm going to submit a member abstract to, but we'll see. There's the Royal Society. There's NICWIC, which we did not submit anything to this year. There's a chance I may be doing things there, but there's a lot of stuff happening like in the next month that will be to sort out.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's things we can try to push forward with that too. Like there's some cognition futures papers. I know we kind of covered embodied neurophenomenology last time, or neurophenomenology, and maybe we can do another push on that paper. That first quarter submission deadlines are upon us. I'm glad AI conference is always a little strange in their, because I asked on Twitter like a few weeks ago, and then it's kind of like, oh, it's here, here's our deadline. You know, it's a little bit different because they tend to, I think they kind of accept people up to pretty late, but it's not always clear. So yeah, maybe we can aim for the end of February to have some things done.
Yeah, definitely if you want a favorable time, because it's in Europe, so, or it's based on European time, so it's like you'll have stuff if you're in North America that might be like at 6 or 7 in the morning. Yeah, it's all good. I think definitely, some of the things we've been talking about and working on, we should definitely target. Maybe a follow up to neurophenomenology would be good. So, last time Amanda gave a general talk, and I think we've got some more specifics now in place on that front. I don't know, Jesse, if you want to. I know you like to recycle the cognition futures talk, the one that you give. Is that something you want to update or?
Maybe. I think everything that was discussed last Cognition Futures meeting is sort of potentially viable. It's just, our biggest thrust has been a lot of first person experience right now. So I mean, I think there's a number of different topics from there we could build off of or incorporate if somebody was a little more ambitious and wanted to do something about development or divergence. There's just the ways that we're looking to add nuance in cognition studies. I think those are viable. So, and again, like just for those who don't know, like basically these are, I think they're, well, no, they're not just flash talks. I think some of them are like 15, 20 minute like breakout sessions. You get to just like, talk and then get feedback. They even group them in certain clusters. So, I mean, as far as just doing a presentation there, I mean, any of those things are game. I'm not yet sure which one I would do, but I'll definitely do something. There's a lot of ripe things for presentations because I feel like presentations are a nice way to explore something and just demarcate an area and do it. I would encourage us to kind of, we can talk about it a little bit now. I guess that's what we're doing, but like, let's think about the sort of the areas that we want to cover. So I don't know, like, I don't know if anybody has any immediate, oh, I really want to do that, but I feel like one, like, I feel like, okay, yes, there's something there to be done. Outside of the follow-up to last year, what other things might people want to do? Yes, we mentioned, I don't know, overview. We'll see. That's something that can be done. I'm not sure I'm going to just do that specific topic. I think, what did you do? You probably did something specifically last year, but I don't recall which one it was.
Probably in the area of developmental AI and or developmental neurosimulation, something on that topic. But I can't remember what I actually presented on last year.
Let's see if this tells us anything.
Oh, the critical period stuff. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Excuse me.
All right. And this year you said you're thinking about what? Was it?
Just general like developmental AI / developmental neurosimulation, that sort of thing. So, but we could also follow up on like critical periods or something related to that too. I mean, just have to think about what's maybe most relevant to things right now. So,
Okay. Those are options. I guess I'll say uh, yeah. I mean, we've talked a little about development stuff. Divergence related stuff. Anything developmental or time. Say that's not what I want. Yeah, those themes are there. I don't think we're going to have time to do this, but it'd be really cool. What about all the Minecraft stuff we talked about on the ML stuff? I think we could have time to put something together for that, but I don't see it as a natural spillover. If Hussein was here, VR some extra stuff. They're working with both that. I think they're dealing with. Let me check with something. I know they're doing some things with like being stimulated or overstimulated in those environments. I'll let them say more about that. But also we talked about these sort of things that might be relevant to what Hussein's doing. But yeah, those are general like brainstorm focused things.
The Minecraft
I think
would be
it's
awesome.
fine. Yeah, I think it's fine now. We'll revisit this Wednesdays for sure, but I don't want to linger here. But I think it's nice just to put some ideas down for this for now. Anything else for that? I've updated the stub here. Open. Where did we go? Oh. Okay. That's anything else we want to say about the conference or submissions, I guess?
Not really for EI, but we should probably review this whole list again. I don't know if we have new things beyond EI, but
okay. At the top of the list is cog size stuff. I'll be at least preparing an abstract for that. I was feeling a little bit ambitious about here we go. I was feeling a little bit ambitious about some of these things, but
it's in Rotterdam. Cool.
Yeah, and then it's really unclear, honestly, because they have this. There's no virtual attendance, but you have some flexibility for if you submit for in person versus you can do it online versus changing online if you submit for in person. Like if you're a presenter or if you have something there, there's a little flexibility, so that's good if anybody actually does want to apply and that isn't there. But yeah, their themes this year are basically across different scales. well, it's kind of seemed they don't really list it out, but it's here in this video. Which won't really watch. Yeah, but do they even have? No, they don't. They don't have any like slides to say. But basically, it's it's sort of like development across not development, but dynamics. So like intrapersonal dynamics, dynamics between two minds, or social or someone else, and then dynamics between an agent and an environment. Are sort of their three. I believe there are three breakdowns. Yeah, here we go. Look at that. I've already pulled this here. Between minds, within the minds, and agent and environments. So that's, there's relevant stuff there. But it's due. I don't know if it's going to be extended. I would imagine not, because it's later in the process, but it is due the 1st. So if anybody's particularly interested in going into that, let me know. I have a few things I'm considering, but mostly that'd be a shorter abstract rather than the minimum requirement for is like the 6-page paper here. So I don't know if you want to talk about Diva Worm or these other 2 papers here.
Yeah, I mean, those are just still crawling along, so they'll be coming out. They'll be the primer and Gibsonian information. I'm still looking for feedback on that, but that's
yes,
still kind of.
I'm hoping to look at that this weekend.
The differentiation paper is still coming along. It's not quite there yet. And then what was the other thing? I think those are the only 2 that were kind of outstanding. So.
There's. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, we do have the cybernetics paper, but that's in less of a finished form. So that's, we might talk about that later. I think the first priority, though, is the one that we're trying to submit for the Royal Society special issues. So that's going to be like kind of on the fast track.
Yeah, I don't know if we have. This is all the abstract, or the call for proposal from Adam. Yeah, nothing really for Nickwick. I mentioned to Bradley earlier this year that I probably wasn't going to do what I normally do for it for a variety of reasons. I am helping out with the conference in other ways. We may need some volunteers or like remote help. People are interested in that. The time comes, but nothing for now. I had to check up on this one. I'm not sure if it's still accepting people or whatever it is. I'm curious about it. Apparently, applications are still open, but it's basically Foresight Institute related. Yeah. It looks cool, but we'll see. But this is the one. I don't know if we want to say anything about this right now, but this is sort of the AGI and hard problems of life-mind continuity towards a unified understanding of the natural and artificial intelligence. Adam has it posted on his page. There's a few different topics here, interesting for people. The world models, functional properties of different kind of world models, equipped with these models shed light on physics of complex systems, consciousness or conscious phenomena, LLMs, and future technology, characteristics of all life, ranging from animals to plants. Okay, so basically you have Levin, you have Tenenbaum, I don't know, Clark, like you can just sort of cluster these people around what they are, which makes perfect sense. Decipher these implemented in different kind of living systems. What extent like 4 degrees of prediction and control. That's
So it's
Anyway.
they got Serena Rich there too.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of
Mitchell, Cameron.
a lot of. It'd be fun. It'd be fun. Fun actually to just cluster everybody into like.
Oh yeah, and Adil Razi is the cortical labs guy. He's grown the cortical labs growing is a dish brain playing Pong.
Oh, okay.
That's Adil Razi. Or I forget if he's like the scientific officer or something.
Okay. I don't know. Does anybody want to propose any particular topical things for this so far?
Well, I mean, we're working on the abstract, but the one that I showed last week, but I don't know beyond that. I mean, that's still kind of early days. Well,
I forget which one that was.
It's basically the Evergood regulator theorem related.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know, there's only so much you can say about it, and then, there's maybe an application section to it or something like that. So, one thing we can just do is take, sort of think about the EGRT very generally and then apply it to some set of domains. And that's the part that, maybe makes it more connected to what they're asking for. So, is there some model system we can use or some domain of knowledge we can talk about regulation in, that sort of thing.
I'll pull in this. I put it in the cybernetics reading group, but I just took a little glance at Danny Bissett's state transitions in the matter in the mind. I guess it's from the main conference, which I kind of missed a lot of the talks there.
This from this year or past years?
I don't think they had one this year, or 2023.
It's from 23. This one's from 23, I believe so. Or let's see. It was 3 years ago. Nope.
Yeah.
So it's much older.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure it's still good.
Yeah.
Like all of their stuff is timeless.
Maybe not, but
Bassett work is timeless.
It isn't. Yeah, it isn't as time bound as like a lot of the AI modeling.
It's a good thing that you can't date it by its content.
Yeah.
But between this and then this, they dive right immediately after that slide. They go into sort of this sort of space between, mind as matter and becomes and is and becoming. So there's interesting talk there. I guess part of my update recently is like I'm particularly interested in. I think I might have to take a little deeper dive into some of Danny Bissett's work because the approach is for a lot of things is really interesting. I mean, this is one that's come up before that I think Morgan posted in the thing, but it's really interesting to think about in terms of the DSM and other things that I'm doing. I guess there's an outside chance, more so probably for embodied intelligence, that I do a DSM related submission to that, which would probably be in that place more like from I don't really want to say philosophical point of view, but almost more like taxonomy, or maybe ontology, or maybe the nosology, just sort of like the naming and the structuring of theories and ideas and labels. That's definitely something I could do, and I'll be able to do an update on that a little bit later, because that's been a nice space to be in. And Jen is kind of not present at the Saturday meetings usually, but is sort of an active person in some things. So, but to talk about the Royal Society. So we have the GRT related paper. I think there's I mentioned the quote in general from the slide was because it kind of had a little bit of an EGRT vibe. It was talking about this sort of meshing point between reality and thought, and sort of this space of I mean, it made me think about the classic, does the regulator have enough, bandwidth or capacity or regulatory nuance to cover all the states of things it's regulating? A little bit of that energy, but yeah, to be continued on that. I don't know if you want to. I guess we can, to follow up on that later. Anything else we want to put down as a potential paper topic for world modeling, or that people are thinking about, I suppose, and raise a hand for?
Yeah, my apologies. I've wanted to really spend some time with the call,
yeah,
and then do some kind of rooting around in the foundation model literature, to see foundation model, world model. I'm not going to try and do it on the fly here, but anyway, I was in Baltimore this week, and so kind of lost some time there.
I'd be curious what you find in the world in the foundational model space that's of interest in general to this. So let me know.
For sure. I'm almost sure that I can link it to the Mind Dojo, which is the Minecraft world's either the paper or some paper that's connected to it. But again, not there yet.
Okay. Well,
or at least that was the first thought I had.
Yeah,
it's really.
But I was still thinking about either like limits to what your world model can do, kind of out of sample.
right.
Or like what's Sutton? It's off policy.
Bitter. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it kind of two ways of saying the same thing. And just in terms of, again, like what I thought was maybe they say hard problem, but we were talking about like how useful are foundation models, world models for scientific discovery, if they're limited by what their training was.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a host of questions there, especially with respect to like regulating a model. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else about this event before we go through the rest of these things here quickly?
I think that should be enough for now. Just let's keep thinking about this. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, sorry, one other thing, I see this towards a unified understanding of natural and artificial intelligence. And I guess one other, or a different direction, but maybe more amenable in the short term is using, at least coming, thinking of this from a kind of computational psychiatry, using neural network models as surrogates for living systems, and using them to basically help diagnose problems, and so that is very naturally computational psychiatry, right? Where certainly like the early work, like Lee Montague, Yalniv kind of stuff is very much like, yeah, these computational models fit differently to different people, and and their interpretability, their limited interpretability tells us something about what's going on with those people.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay. I don't think we've done anything. Well, I don't know if there's been any more progress on the cybernetics one, but just that it's here.
Probably not. I mean, just that's there. Yeah. Well, like I said, I think the world models paper is first priority because that's going to be has a hard deadline. So,
position papers there. It's kind of it has an important discussion about sort of short-term and long-term things. Frontier map paper exists. I'm going to probably move this into the I'm probably going to move the post-Fuchs review into a part of my monitor keeps one of my monitor keeps like turning off. That's weird. Sorry. I'm probably going to combine this with the review of our progress part of the position paper umbrella. Maybe it's better umbrella of the papers. A-Life. I don't know. That's already passed, so I think we're done with that. I don't know if anything was submitted to that from us or not.
Is that like for papers or for workshops? I think you had something in the Slack on workshops, but I think the papers are those still open. Oh, February 12th.
Yeah. Let's say
this.
No. I'm going to move this date to February 12th. We're like, gee, that's pretty early.
But that's when they open.
Totally
that's when they
open.
Yeah,
I know. So let's look at that again there.
Is it 12th or the
5th? It says the paper's open for submission.
Oh, sorry.
Close.
I was thinking about the workshop. Sorry.
In April. Yeah. Okay. Dimensions of Radical Embodiment is another. When is this one due? Because this looks relevant. It's in Spain, but I don't know when this is due. It looks like I put March 1st as well, but I don't know. I'll look at that later. We've got the conference, which is. I just have to change this. ISPS and recap. All right, cool. I think all this other stuff is set, so we can move on to other things unless there's another, specific thing people want to talk about. But I think we're good with the general, what's going on right now. What else do we want to talk about today? I could do a general update of sorts, but I'm sure there's other things we want to get into.
Go ahead, Morgan.
Well, two things. Sorry, these are more psychiatry, but one, I forget the name of this particular writer. It's like Astral Codex.
Oh yes. The Slate Star Codex, Astral Codex.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm curious why this person's popping up in my timeline so much now, but like he did a grant. He or she, I honestly don't know. Did a grant thing or put out a, like I'm funding particular projects, and
oh really?
Yeah. So it showed up in a bunch of groups that I'm part of. I mean, so Biopunk Society flagged this, and Neurotech X Paris, or well, basically Coglab had flagged this, and so some people had thought about it. Anyway, but see some unintuitive properties of polygenic disorders. So anyway, they wrote a great piece about the article that I had flagged, and that I just was so disappointed in, because the writer of the original commentary is someone who supposedly supports schizophrenia research, and like doesn't seem to know the field. like made just egregious, let's just call them mistakes in this commentary. And so I gotta say, this was a really nice, I mean, one, I'm just jealous of anybody who can write at this level, and a subject which apparently they're new to it, or anyway, it explains a lot about some common misconceptions in kind of the public zeitgeist, or public consciousness, I should say, about psychiatric genetic disorders and their non-Mendelian nature. And like I originally said, just about misunderstanding things about heritability, what constitutes a genetic disorder. But some other good stuff too, in terms of like, even if somehow you remove, don't allow these particular people to be a part of the genetic pool, like why this would still be a particular problem. So there's some good evolutionary, there's some good like population biology, evolutionary biology in there too. And yeah, it was, I gotta say, I was impressed. And as I posted, like other groups that I have respect for, like Mad in America, which is a really good book. Again, like I felt awful, because it's like I support the goals of some of these people, but like that's no excuse for misunderstanding the basic science. And anyway, so like other groups had taken this particular commentary from the original author and had run with it with their own stories. So people would be even, it was kind of watching misinformation propagate. So it was really nice to see this, and in particular nice because this person seems to be funding some interesting cog-sci, neurosci work too, or is interested in it. So that was nice. That's the original. That's the original article, and he's with this Stanley Medical Research Institute that's supposedly focused on schizophrenia research, but doesn't seem to understand even what the Human Genome Project is. Yeah, it's like, what? And then Tom Insel had an op-ed, who's the former head of NIMH, and I think again, is again a kind of counter to this particular article, where it's just like, you know, this Tari, who wrote the original article, you know, seems to suggest that, you know, there's no good understanding of what's going on with schizophrenia. And, you know, as a Tom Insel wasn't replying to this article, but just as I said, like, plenty of NIMH people understand, you know, what's going on in the field. And Tom Insel wrote a great commentary. I'll try and find the link, sorry. It's like December 8th or something like that. But if you search for Tom Insel, INSEL, it's a nice overview of, you know, the problems that we are having in it's about basically the mental health crisis and in its various forms, and you know, acknowledging things that we all know that should be talked about more, such as, like, you know, prisons are primary mental health clinic in the United States and things like that. I'll find an article, but you know, it really important, you know, especially if again, I'm not sure what your goals are with the DSM review, but
oh yeah, I mean that's that would be very related to that, which I don't know. I could talk about that in a little bit, but I know we're kind of we're in the second hour, so I don't know what did you want to talk about, Bradley? I know we're kind of
well, I mean, I did want to give maybe one set of papers, but, you know, if you can do like maybe a 15-minute update on what you're doing, that would be good.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. For other things this week, it's been, I guess. Oh, I'll start not even sharing my screen at the minute. Basically, it's just structuring. Nothing's really happened for condition futures, although I've been toiling away at things, but nothing really fun to talk about for that. Based on the reading group, the cybernetics reading group, this week. I was pretty under the weather this week also, so I'm glad to be kind of normal, knock on wood. As far as the DSM stuff that's going, a lot of it's kind of thinking about what are the themes we want to do, and the process sort of evolved a little bit organically, and it's kind of a space for Jen to get experience. She wanted to just write some blog posts and stuff, and so we've kind of been talking about how to structure, what do we want to cover in these things, and kind of, you know, just very much early stages of like lit review, getting bearings, getting context. We kind of have a little bit of a series of blog posts mapped out for things to target, like an overview and some historical things, and then a few things about maybe some of like the main big ideas of the day, or some of the models that were used. But it's what I'm taking away from it, and my role is like related to conditioning futures and related to everything we talk about, related to some other like things. What I kind of like it to be in a Joe Pro sense is sort of one, it's this experience for someone getting used to doing things, but two, it'd be a really nice primer. Like what I kind of would like to take away from it, like a primer for, you know, what does this say for things? I mean, we're all familiar with conditioned futures, but for someone who isn't familiar with that space, like what does everything that's happened with the DSM kind of say about, I don't know, the push towards nuance and the push, and the tango with like biology, the tango with trying to make things science. It really touches upon the space of, you know, kind of being originally potentially anti-scientific, or I don't know how you really want to refer to early days of what became psychiatric evaluation or discussion or treatments. And it's like Morgan said, now in the modern sense, now our biggest, mental institutions are the prisons, the mental health centers are prisons. And it's in a way that is also how it used to be a long time ago in certain ways too. And so it's an interesting thing. I'm considering if Jen wants to go forward with things, which maybe, like there's blog articles are kind of the first step in the classic, start simple things. I don't know if it's going to be anything. I mean, it could maybe be presented at the Embodied Intelligence conference. I'm not trying to push too much for that, but I would like her also to do a presentation here, or flash talk or something that's on the docket. But that's something that would benefit her as getting used to doing like academic presentation. For those who don't know, Jen also is considering doing like a few different master's programs. She's a background in health, like public health stuff, but considering things like social work, considering things like other diversity and medical related stuff, basically. So this is sort of potentially helping in that sense, but I wouldn't mind turning it into kind of a review or a survey paper of some sort with specific lenses we want to look at. Some of those lenses have to do with, like I'm really interested in I really want to take a much deeper dive into this paper because Danny Bissette's really cool in general, yes. It has this really nice background of complexity and kind of a lot of the formalization stuff we might be looking into for other things and just like familiarity with that space. And I think I actually have the paper up here still, unless I lost it. Yeah, awesome, cool.
Amanda sent it.
But just like, I really want to take a deeper dive into this. Try to make this a little bit larger. Hold on, sorry.
Oh, you're not showing your screen, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it's not even to see yet. This kind of will work. All right. But just super quickly to do this, like basically, this paper is a call for a dynamic or temporal developmental context. And so it starts off by kind of giving some background and saying, there's been these concerns about diagnostic frameworks that existed for a long time, and she kind of goes through this stuff, which is all stuff I don't really know about. So I really want to get into this section in particular, and she kind of sets things up by getting into, the sort of trends diagnostic approaches where we're incorporating things and making a little more diversity, going away from kind of blanket classification of yes or no groups to looking at, more trying to get more of a scalar or a continuous lens as opposed to just a discrete yes or no, and looking at
multidimensional as well.
Yeah. And she wants to do that and also add this sort of time or developmental component. So I mean, I'm just really getting into this paper, and I'm happy to talk more about if we want to do that, or maybe we should even talk about this Wednesday or something. But feel like, sorry?
What is the name of the paper? The first one?
This here.
The Danny Bassett.
This is the papers.
Understanding divergence.
Okay.
This is it. It's just this is the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Well, I was just going to say, I'd love to help because, the transdiagnostic approach, basically RDoC, and so I'm trying to remember what RDoC stands for, but this is the NIMH realignment, right? So when they said it was no longer necessary to frame your grant proposals in terms of DSM categories. And RDoc, I want to say it's like 2015, something like that, maybe earlier. But just say RDoc, RDOC. Yeah, there's definitely that funding shift, but RDoc is the research domain criteria. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the this is the new framework under which researchers discuss the relevance of their work, how subjects are chosen, or how they're analyzed, and so Child Mind Institute's Child Mind Institute Healthy Brain Network data set, as I always bang on about, its first paper is like a transdiagnostic data set for normative data set for psychiatric research, something like that. And again, they're very much trying to create the data set which you can then use for any new subjects you bring in, because it's multidimensional. There's deep phenotyping. There's all of this stuff is there. And they're trying to capture this whole, I love that Danny would say this in terms of how important time is, that actually so many of these trajectories have speed ups or slow downs. And, so our traditional approach of taking cross-sectional time analysis, it was incredibly problematic, because we were interpreting those as differences and not as we were interpreting them as like structural differences as opposed to, if you will, velocity differences along a trajectory. And that if we had followed those people, we would have perhaps ended up with the same structures, and anyway. So super important to look at this kind of repeated measures approaches. But I just wanted to add something just in terms of directions to go on this, and where it to some degree, Tom Insel's certainly an important person to mention, is that let's not forget that this is the guy that was hired away and started working at Google, right? So with RDoc and with the realignment, there was this interest in yes, it gets worse. he was, and then he went to a company called MindStrong, and I can tell you more about these, but my point is that the tech industry then was just like, oh, mental health is up for grabs, or hey, we can do this better. And I think Verily is really interesting to look at their cohort of 10,000, which is interesting because it matches what Child Mind Institute was collecting. They were like, hey, we're going to put Fitbits and watches and we're going to track these people's phones, and so there was this massive digital phenotyping, and Tom Insel's got the papers at the you can track this, like you were saying. I can kind of tell you what year it was by what people were talking about. so this digital phenotyping became super hot and was kind of again, I think Mindstrong has pivoted multiple times, and I forget his role, but basically Mindstrong didn't keep Tom Insel, I don't think, but they did get the head of the Stanford Psych fMRI unit, Bob Doherty, and I'm pretty sure he still works there. So it would be really interesting to track him down and to, but I would love to hear Mindstrong's investor pitch currently, in terms of what they are tracking or what they're still doing in this space.
There's a lot. Yeah, I think what I might try to talk to you more about that, or I don't know how to wedge this into things, because one of the big questions that come up in the DSM project was there's a lot more about some of the historical things and a little bit less commentary on some of it's been harder. Jen hasn't quite known what to look at for the newer things. And I think it'll be nice to get a sense of, how do I say, you have a pretty good understanding of my interest and our interest here. So it'd be nice to kind of merge on that. But yeah,
it would be nice, because I think it would be nice. I've never tried to kind of put this all together, because after Mindstrong, again, it started following the tech trends, right? So Wobots came along, which was Andrew Ning. So then it became with the rise of chatbots, it was wait, we can use these for psychiatry, and and I wonder. I mean, I think it would be really interesting, because you get a sense of basically where the Silicon Valley's thinking is at this point. If you got Mindstrong's current investor pitch, because I'm just, without seeing it, I'm pretty sure it's probably changed to some sort of large language model.
Yeah. I'm sure. Our AI-powered LLM for your mental health concerns.
And again, I think Mind Fixers needs to be updated.
Right. Exactly.
For the rise of Silicon Valley.
Well, and that's I think a potentially interesting inflection point of all this is the DSM-5 came out just as deep learning was going, in that, I think it was 2013, the 5, and there was a recent update. I guess the TR came out, was I don't know, 2019 was its thing, and it was published basically 2 years ago. It came into full effect, I guess, 2 years ago. So we're just getting to the later stuff.
Definitely add Wobots, WOEBOTS, because that had similar, Andrew NG was the Wobots advisor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So again, I'm always interested in the again, Silicon Valley does kind of run the world currently. So you get a sense of where their head is by what teams they join, or
exactly,
big ML people join these particular companies, and finally, just wanted to add that. I think is it Eric Topol down in San Diego? Anyway, someone who is best known for evidence-based medicine, kinds of approaches. Not exactly a Ben Goldacre guy, but anyway, I forget if it was this. He was being interviewed by the CEO, maybe of Robots, and so I get the feeling that they're still quite a well-funded player in this, and there is there's a lot to be said for these approaches. There's a lot to be learned from their failures as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot. Being conscious of time, I'll kind of close it up there. But I'll leave on the note saying part of why am I concerned about DSM is because of all this stuff. Like it's such a, especially it's like in the American sense. There's a whole the international and the ICD stuff, and we're just looking at. But DSM is this. I don't even know, lightning rod, melting pot. You can use whatever examples you want, but it's such a contentious point between like first person experience, first person data, which is cognition futures related, but isn't really accounted for in certain ways, and then the advent of like whatever, I don't even know how to talk about like psycho, all the psychoanalysis stuff, and then the biology, making it biological, chemistry, like the subtitle of the Mind Church's book is like biology of mental illness, right? And then you have this tech wave that's the biggest thing, and you have sort of like the big data, deep learning, and now it's like the actual tech tracking, intervention, biometrics, like that aspect of things. So like there's just so much in this space that's sort of mesh point of theory and biology and technology and money and politics. So it's a really interesting space to try to do work in it. Like right now, just super low level. Well, I guess high level, but like low intensity. But yeah, that's kind of why. That's sort of why this is coming up. So more ahead about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just I know we gotta wrap this up, but I just want to add one note on to follow up with you on Hough and I'd sent this to y'all. It's a Dutch professor who leads the group on kind of web-based CBT, but I can say more about it. But in terms of someone who's really is trying to roll out things at a population scale that makes a difference in terms of like when you've got say Ukrainians mass migration, people in that kind of situation where if you can roll out an intervention, you can potentially, you can literally save lives and certainly prevent, at that scale, prevent a whole, large population from converting from, healthy to some sort of diagnosis.
Okay.
Just want to
put
that a note.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's great. Great conversation, and hopefully that'll contribute to maybe some sort of publication or talk or whatever. I'm fascinated by that history and kind of the sort of the unfolding of these different like Silicon Valley inserting themselves into things, and yeah.
That's sort of where I would like to go, is to get some experience in putting at least a preprint together. There's different conferences I could go to, but like I think like Jen's doing good work, and then there's so much stuff. Like the conversation we just had there's a lot there, so I would like to go in that direction ahead. But maybe I'll talk about it Wednesdays because I don't really know where to best talk about it yet. Yeah.
Mad in America is another great book. So I dropped a link to their their Twitter feed for something that I didn't like that they said. But the original book is a nice compendium of problems with American psychiatric care.
So yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's great. So let me continue on here. I had a few things that I had sort of selected, and then I want to maybe get into some readings. So let me share my screen again. So one thing we posted in the Slack is this article on dissipative delusions. I think I found this. It's on some of our complexity people. So this is on Ilya Prigogine. This is a picture of Ilya Prigogine. And he was a person who was interested in dissipative systems and things like that. So he kind of proposed this idea of dissipative systems, which are these systems that kind of build complexity based on their use of energy. So if you think about like a river that flows through a landscape, the river brings a flow of water, and the water brings a flow of energy, and that river basin is basically an energetic, or it has a lot of productivity, whereas if there wasn't a river there, it would not have the same productivity. So that's the idea basically behind dissipative structures. And so this is an article by, this is from Peter Holme's blog. Peter Holme is a complexity person who often publishes blog posts on sort of things that are critical of different aspects of the history of complexity theory. So this is published this week. And so it says, lately I've been reading books and papers of and about Ilya Prigogine, and here's a little report. So it starts off very positively, where he says, I have always been fascinated by cult leaders. So, his idea here is that basically Ilya Prigogine had this little scientific echo chamber, I guess he put it, and he called the followers Prigogenians. So Prigogenians were people who were sort of disciples of Ilya Prigogine. And you find this in science every now and again, where you have some theorist or some person with a strong set of ideas, and you have people who are maybe their students or people who are disciples of that approach, and they kind of recapitulate that approach over and over again. So like, it's not quite the same as like, taking a theoretical position. It's more like, this is what this person, whether or not the ideas are fully formed or whatever, this is what this person, said, and so I'm going to follow that approach. So this is something you see in science every now and again. And so this is kind of the approach that he takes in this article. So he kind of talks about, over the holiday break, I read John Horgan's The End of Science, which prompted a deeper dig into the writings of and about Ilya Prigogine. Horgan recounts a funny episode about an interview with Prigogine, which was more of a sermon than a dialogue. It was interrupted for lunch, a meal taken in the faculty club with Prigogine seated like Jesus in the Last Supper, surrounded by his disciples, Prigoginians, and with Horgan coincidentally in the spot of Judas. So this is very much, this is a very metaphorical sort of discussion here. The discussion proceeded with Prigogine completely controlling the conversation, calling for the lab members to make statements and then reinterpreting them for Horgan. So definitely in that model of like, I don't know if you want to call it an academic cult, but what about the science itself? After all, he did clinch a Nobel. Now the Nobel Prize is for the most important chemical discovery. The committee was unusually vague about what the discovery entailed. For his contributions to non-equilibrium thermodynamics, which is where you can place dissipative structures in that theory, particularly the theory of dissipative structures. What's important about such structures then? Well, in the words of Prigogine's student Dilip Kandapudi, one of the most celebrated aspects of dissipative structures is explaining how patterns can form in chemical systems far from equilibrium. So that was sort of the way that they described dissipative structures to a more general audience. But there is a glaring logical glitch. Dissipative structures are emergent patterns per definition, and thus they don't explain how the patterns form. Thermodynamics shows the patterns, information, order, life, etc., must be created far from equilibrium and incur an entropy cost. But Prigogine and his entourage reverse the causality without a flinch. So non-equilibrium is the source of order. Non-equilibrium brings out chaos. That's sort of the way they thought about it. And then the person who wrote the blog post says that's not true. That's not really the way it works. In fact, non-equilibrium brings you anything and everything. Order out of chaos, chaos out of order, a beer, a facepalm. And so what he's saying here is he's critiquing this idea of the causality of how a dissipative structure is formed. And so the idea here is that, you can use the term or terms like non-equilibrium to, kind of conjure up anything you want. So you can, use basically terms, regardless of how they're understood, to sort of, generate things. It's kind of like that classic comic it's Sidney Harris's comic on someone at a blackboard, and they're diagramming out different steps. And then step 2 says how a miracle then a miracle occurs. And then the other person at the board says, I think you should be more explicit about step 2. So it's that sort of idea. Yeah, there we go. So it's that idea of being, kind of invoking things that maybe you can't understand or can't describe properly or don't understand the causality of to make some sort of, mechanism. So this is always something we look out for, and he's basically criticizing the approach that Prigogine sort of championed. And then, of course, when you have that sort of, I guess the way he puts it, cult-like following, it can be, these ideas can be reinforced, and we can have things that are maybe misinterpretations of what's going on in the real world. So like complexity scientists, Prigogine prophesized a new type of science, a new rationality, away from Newtonian laws, determinism, and certainty. But it hasn't a great deal of science been statistical all the way back to the Enlightenment. Can one find laws in science? Anywho, he also denounced the complexity science of the Santa Fe Institute crowd for the futility of searching for universal truths. So Prigogine was against sort of the Santa Fe Institute approach of like power laws and complex networks. And so there's this sort of, he was advocating for a new type of rationality that was sort of, I guess, meta-Newtonian or anti-Newtonian. And so I guess this is a quote from Prigogine. One should not exaggerate and dream about a unified theory, which will include politics and economics and the immune system and physics and chemistry. So this goes back to some of the stuff we've talked about with respect to universality of models. So like, if we have a model of networks, we can use a network to describe a brain or a social group or, like some set of protein-protein interactions or, a wide variety of phenomena that, maybe that's not the way to go. So that's what Prigogine was arguing, that there's this non-universality. Well, in any case, while at the same time having no problem extrapolating his results to pretty much anything. So I guess he's pointing out the hypocrisy of being a non-universalist, but then having a theory or a pet theory that will describe anything. So another quote was, one should not think that progress in chemical non-equilibrium reactions will give you the key for human politics. Of course not. But it still brings in a unified element. It brings in the element of bifurcation. It brings the idea of historical dimension. It brings the idea of evolutionary patterns, which indeed you find on all levels. And in this sense, it's a unifying element of our view of the universe. Not universal, but universal, which is the critique of Peter Holme saying that this is like, you're saying things are not universal, but my idea is universal, and I'm just going to describe it in a different way. So this is a very critical view of complexity science and Prigogine. But also, reading Prigogine reminds me of Per Bach and self-organized criticality. So we talked about Per Bach. We've talked about the Bach Weisenfeld-Tang model, or I guess the Bach-Tang-Weisenfeld model, the BTW model, which is the sandpile model. So we've talked about self-organized criticality and the sandpile model, where if you take a number of grains of sand and you drop them and form a pile, and you keep dropping grains of sand on that pile, you get avalanches at a certain frequency over time. So you can generate a time series that shows these avalanche events. And so this is the kind of theory that maybe also is in this vein. So in critiquing Per Bach's work as well, both blew up their claims to comical proportions. So the sandpile model is good for describing the dynamics of, say, a sandpile or some of these critical dynamics. But then, of course, those claims were taken and applied to everything in the world. So here's a quote: "Life and the absence of life are just two states of matter separated by a chemical instability." Versus self-organized criticality is the only known mechanism to explain how the universe could start with a few types of elementary particles at the Big Bang and end up with life, history, economics, and literature. And so I guess the big difference was that Bach's science was more spectacular per se, so the gaps between his papers and claims were smaller. And correspondingly, the gap between reality and Bach's models were astronomical. So basically, the idea that you can apply this theory to everything is, maybe going a little bit too far, I guess. Prigogine's actual research papers seem relatively precise and mundane. So, you can look at these different types of universal types of approaches, and that's basically the criticism. Above, we saw Prigogine's disdain for Bach's universality claims. Anyone thinking that feelings weren't reciprocated will be disappointed, as Bach reviewed Prigogine's The End of Certainty. That was one of Prigogine's books. And this is from Bach's review of that book. Every now and then, crackpot papers are submitted for publication to scientific journals. When pseudoscience is presented by a highly esteemed Nobel Prize-winning chemist, the damage is not so easy to contain. Indeed, Prigogine has a great following among chemists, however, and humanistic scientists. However, as John Maynard Smith once said in a book by Prigogine, if non-equilibrium statistical mechanics excites poets, so be it. Alas, chemistry and the humanities, what a match made in hell. So this is, then Better Holme says, "Oh no, I am ambivalent about Prigogine's legacies, his legacy, or Bach's for that matter." Didn't seem like it in the article, but whatever. On the one hand, he definitely shook the community out of its lull and made people think in newer, grander ways. He popularized thermodynamics and the study of non-equilibrium processes and brought new minds to the topic. Then again, this type of not really cult leader, but ... scientist harms a field's credibility and leaves us with believers immune to rational arguments, thus slowing down progress. Well, it must have been hard to correctly judge hypes like these when they had happened, because they followed the format of true scientific revolutions. A warning sign, if any, should be that they both exploited the cultural trope of deep, mysterious connections between seemingly unrelated everyday experiences. And this is a link to Peter Holmes' article here on the Twilight of Fantastical Science, which is another blog post from 2023. And so this is a nice article. It's in, I can't remember where I posted it in the Slack, but if you want to read more, you can read it here. I think it's a nice exploration into the history and philosophy of science. So yeah.
Yeah, that it's certainly it reminds me of some of how I mean, to not take it as quite scientific, but when you see these quantum healing kinds of things, where it's just like you take a topic that people don't understand,
right,
and then apply it in some context where it's just like, well, this would be the key. This would be the key to untold new understanding and untold you certainly see that, right? And yeah, funny stuff, but it's difficult to know how to rein in the kind of everything seems possible with nonlinear dynamics.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, there was a period of time historically when you had like fractals where people would put these fractal visualizations up, and it was kind of like they explain everything. And every time you have sort of a new discovery like that, it's sort of the same pattern of it explains everything, like power laws, for example, and other things. So there are all these different examples from the sociology of complexity science in particular, but other sciences, like we just talked about, with different trends in psychiatry, where people say, well, I can solve this problem with this approach, and then it doesn't pan out. But I think the other thing to point out there is that sort of model of having like a strong personality proposing these things, where you have people who become disciples, and then they kind of reinforce the ideas, but the ideas themselves weren't necessarily strong to begin with, so it becomes a self-perpetuating thing.
I think there are neuroimagers who worry that Friston will end up as a similar, not that he's cultivating that, but right, that again, like his ideas will be, it's kind of it's the second generation where it's getting applied in all sorts of fields,
right.
And without necessarily good metrics in terms of what is this adding, or not that I'm gonna say what's this.
Jesse said there's something about Hadot, philosophy, history of science, or belief, religion, that comes to mind also. I was glancing at a book about his take on cross-contamination and mistranslations.
I do feel like a lot of Brigitte and Bohm gets used because there hasn't been a revolution. Like everybody wants there to be, in their lifetime, they want a new worldview, right? And
I think that's a great point. Yes.
I have to say all the time to people, like, we might not have anything new in psychiatry for like 100 years. Like, we might have to be collecting data, like there's nothing in history says that we are due a breakthrough.
Right.
I have some tentative writings, but like I would really like to make a writing. It doesn't be a paper, but something specifically about that. Like we just talked about. I'm not going to say his name right. Prigogine.
Yeah.
And then what Morgan just said is like that's my oldest story about this. Like one of my first career paths I ever went into was like, I'm going to be a sort of ex-political science or ex-international relations. I decided I'd do like energy security or the energy sector analysis, stuff like that. And that was my introduction to basically what Morgan said. And like everybody was like, oh, well, here's my plan. And like, we gotta like it's just such a fact that there's going to be this much growth of population, this energy, man, we're going to meet it. Here's how we're going to meet it. And it was just like, well, what if we can't? Like, what if there's very important reasons why we can't do this technology or policy or other innovation? And I just feel like that's such an important concept, and it's so counter to all the hype stuff. Like even in the article, there's some hype stuff. We all know about AI, summers and winters, but I feel like that's such an important. I guess it's almost like a layer deeper than just generic media literacy or critical thinking. It's like that. Plus, by the way, there's like legitimate factors that are kind of creating the stalemate, and they require a specific understanding for why they exist beyond just that. But it's also juxtaposed to that compulsion for like, I mean, there's a very real pressure to like people want a change, and like that's a valid thing, but like understanding how you manage that pressure. I appreciate the article, Bradley. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's humorous as well as enlightening.
One. Go ahead. I wanted to make the point about, I don't know how to say his name, Pierre Hadot, I think, but the philosophy guy. But okay, I'll say that. What I was saying is, and interesting. I'm thumbing through a book just randomly came across me, but he made an interesting point that like philosophy a long time ago, like in, I guess could say Athens and that sort of turn of the millennia and earlier era, philosophy was kind of seen as it wasn't a philosopher. You were a school of thought. You were this way of thinking that a master or some powerful thing had. And the different schools of thought, like Stoicism or Aristotle, had their like camps, and they were in that same space. But there was and this is sort of interesting along the lines of a lot of like embodiment and other things too, but apparently something happened, and many people will come in and tell me the right way about this, but from what I'm gleaning from the text, and there was this comment about how like the schools of Athens eventually became dispersed because they couldn't, I don't know if they were like religiously kicked out or whatever, but the schools themselves transferred from a culture of people trying to like embody or align to a certain view towards a group that became essentially, I forget the word, but like they became very specifically taking meaning from text because the communities weren't there, the old masters weren't there, and then it became text interpretation, and how that shift created a lot of interesting things, good and bad things. Hadot seems to spend one of his big things is like looking at mistranslations and how, like, either rightly or wrongly, like the cross-contamination about ideas. Like there's a lot of overlap between, pagan ideas and Christian ideas and how they overlap. Like why are things on? There's a lot of cross, people taking different sides of, oh, this has to be this way or this way, and here's the idea, but here's the momentum, here's the inertia for why this happened. But sort of the idea of cross, even unintentional cross, like pollination of ideas and how that's splurging into different things over time. So that's interesting to think about for a lot of the stuff we're talking about, but and it's sort of funny because I'm kind of not interested in a lot of early philosophy stuff, but I understand there's use in understanding the why and how that happened too. Anyway, what did you want to talk about anything else, Bradley? I know we're kind of top of the hour.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to finish up with talking about following up on something we've talked about in earlier meetings. So let me go to this folder here. So we talked about non-Euclidean spaces and virtual reality. We talked about this last year on September 2nd. I talked about the game Hyperbolica. We talked about non-Euclidean virtual reality and sort of the mathematics of it. So, there's this computational geometry and topology aspect of these non-Euclidean spaces. You have games which are based on these non-Euclidean spaces. And then you have, we can visualize these non-Euclidean spaces in different ways. So this is actually a hyperbolic space, which is a type of non-Euclidean space. And in the world of virtual reality, we kind of take all of the different types of spaces that don't really exist in the everyday world and, kind of categorize them as non-Euclidean. So we talked about hyperbolic spaces. We also talked about maybe some more different aspects of these non-Euclidean spaces, where we have non-Euclidean game worlds. So in video game design, we have these non-Euclidean worlds engines that people have created. You have different ways of thinking. I mean, I don't know if people think about this in the game world in a very theoretical way, but people have developed these different engines. So in this case, there's a hyperbolic 3D game engine where a line is not necessarily the shortest path between two places. And so this, I guess maybe people are just getting started on this, but this blog post, this person XenoRogue, has some nice hyperbolic world simulations on YouTube where they kind of navigate through a virtual world that is this hyperbolic space. And you can definitely kind of bend your mind watching these videos because, they're very, very, very different from how we usually navigate through the world. But, they make the point here that while such games typically tend to be amazing and very fun, this is not what non-Euclidean traditionally means for mathematicians, for whom it has a more precise meaning, which is not anything that isn't a perfectly normal space. So there's a difference between in virtual reality development and game development, what we mean by non-Euclidean and what mathematicians mean and what geometers mean. So this is an interesting point. We didn't bring it up too much last year when I talked about those last fall. I was just focused on sort of the application domain and maybe contrasting some of the ways mathematicians think about these things. But what's interesting is that people have been using these kind of game worlds to look at psychology. And so, if we can go to the ecological psychology literature, and they've been starting to produce some studies that have been based on people navigating these non-Euclidean worlds. So this is an article from William Warren, who's pretty prolific in ecological psychology literature. And he wrote this review in Non-Euclidean Navigation. This was published in the Journal of Experimental Biology in 2019. So this was a review article on talking about some of these navigation strategies. So let's look at this, what he has to say. So the abstract reads: a basic set of navigation strategies supports navigational tasks, ranging from homing to novel detours and shortcuts. To perform these last two tasks is generally thought that humans, mammals, and perhaps some insects possess Euclidean cognitive maps constructed on the basis of input from the path integration system. So what he's getting at here is that there are these representations in the brain. We have place cells, we have grid cells, and a lot of that is assumed to be Euclidean. And so, in this article, I review the rationale and behavioral evidence for this metric cognitive map hypothesis and find it unpersuasive, as a ecological psychologist might. So this is basically critiquing the cognitive map hypothesis, not just the idea that we have these Euclidean representations, but that people in the literature have been very specific about this, and that he finds it unpersuasive. In practice, there is little evidence for truly novel shortcuts in animals, and human performance is highly unreliable and biased by environmental features. I developed the alternative hypothesis that spatial knowledge is better characterized as a labeled graph, a network of paths between places augmented with local metric information. what distinguishes such a cognitive graph from a metric cognitive map. So you have cognitive graphs, which is William Warren's hypothesis, and the metric cognitive map, which is the sort of the place cell, grid cell representation model, is that this local information is not embedded in a global coordinate system. So spatial knowledge is often geometrically inconsistent. Human path integration appears to be better suited to piecewise measurements of path lengths and turn angles than to building a consistent map. And so path integration, if you're not familiar, is a phenomenon that we see across a wide variety of organisms where they have a home base, and then they move around the space to different landmarks. And then they can integrate that information to build a map of that space. So that if they, visit a couple of landmarks and end up in a location that they've never really been before, they can integrate that space, figure out where the home base is, and return to the home base. You can also sort of, misorient the organism in a way that's systematic, so you can turn them like 45 degrees, and they can also figure out how to sort of transform that space and go back to the home base. So this has been done in insects, this has been done in mammals, this has been done in other organisms. It's a very, I want to say universal ability of animals, or at least animals with brains, but it's been demonstrated in a lot of taxa. And so, this is something that, focusing in path integration, we know that there's a difference in the way that space is integrated. And so we don't need to necessarily build a consistent map. We just need to have some of these piecewise measurements. In a series of experiments in immersive virtual reality, we tested human navigation in non-Euclidean environments. So these are these environments that are non-Euclidean spaces, such as hyperbolic spaces, and found that shortcuts manifest large violations of the metric postulates. So, navigating like a constant negative curvature, you can't use a traditional map. You can't use a Euclidean map because it would fail. And so sometimes we don't do very well in navigating these spaces. And so that's what he's kind of pointing out here. But they did these experiments and found that if you make a shortcut on such a space, they manifest large violations, and it really messes things up. The results are contrary to the Euclidean map hypothesis and support the cognitive graph hypothesis. Apparently, Euclidean behavior, such as taking novel detours and approximate shortcuts, can be explained by the adaptive use of non-Euclidean strategies. So this is an interesting study here, or actually there's a study in a review. This just kind of talks about sort of the alternative to this cognitive map hypothesis, and it kind of goes into the details of that, the difference between Euclidean maps and non-Euclidean spaces. And so there's an interesting sort of history in the psychology literature on this. And so it's an interesting way to reinterpret that. So these are alternative hypotheses for spatial knowledge. This A figure is route knowledge, which is this graph that represents route knowledge going from landmark to landmark. B is a topological graph, which denotes places and edges and paths, potential paths between them. So this is how you might form a shortcut from this map of locations. And then C is a labeled graph where you weight the edges by maybe their orientation in terms of, like what degree displacement they are from straight ahead or side to side or whatever. So you can weight the edges of these graphs. And then D is a Euclidean map where places correspond to coordinates in a metric system. So you can see the difference between these graphs in A through C, and D where it's sort of like this fixed location, and there's this translation and transformation that has to occur between them. And so this is the kind of the way he's thinking about this. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next study, which is this article on route selection in non-Euclidean virtual environments. This is from, I think, 2021. This is in PLoS One. So the abstract reads, the way people choose routes through unfamiliar environments provide clues about the underlying representation they use. One way to test the nature of observers' representation is to manipulate the structure of the scene as they move through it and measure which aspects of performance are significantly affected and which are not. We record the routes that participants took in virtual mazes to reach previously viewed targets. The mazes were either physically realizable or impossible, containing wormholes that altered the layout of the scene. So this is where we have this non-Euclidean aspect, these impossible views and impossible landscapes. We found that participants could usually find the shortest route between remembered objects, even in physically impossible environments, despite the gross failures in pointing that an earlier study showed are evident in the physically impossible environment. So again, we find these impossible environments being not really a problem for participants to navigate. They can do that. They can find the shortest route. It might take them some time. But if we had these cognitive maps that were strictly Euclidean, you might think it would be impossible to do. So this supports kind of this alternate hypothesis that William Warren posited. In the physically impossible conditions, the choice made at a junction was influenced to a greater extent by whether that choice had, in the past, led to discovery of a target, compared to shortest distance prediction. In the physically realizable mazes, on the other hand, junction choices were determined more by the shortest distance to the target. So that suggests that there's this difference between the physically impossible and these physically realizable mazes. Maybe that means that there are two different types of representation, that there's this cognitive map for the Euclidean spaces, but also we have this path integration graph that exists for things that you can't, that aren't Euclidean, that are non-Euclidean. And there may be good reasons to have that because, our visual world is three-dimensional, at least. And so, we have a two-dimensional sort of representation in space, maybe even a three-dimensional representation in space. But there are other things going on in space, and there are other ways that you can interpret space from a sensory perspective. So, we don't really know why, but there could be two different systems. This pattern of results is compatible with the idea of a graph-like representation of space that include information about previous success or failure for traversing each edge, and also information about the distance between nodes. So they suggest that there's this graph, this spatial graph, but that it has different properties that we can maybe understand a little bit better. So this is actually a good graph of the labyrinth. So this is A is a view from above, where you look down at the entire environment, and B is a first-person view where you're going as you navigate. And so the green target is visible inside of a gray box. And so the idea is to navigate the space and find these green targets. And you can do this from a first person and a top-down perspective. And so this is where we have a fixed environment. We have wormholes where you can teleport from different points to other points. And then a 3-wormhole environment. So you can go through these wormholes and get to so the environment is discontinuous, basically. And so this is, again, the trajectories for people moving around the environment. This is the fixed condition. This is the 1 wormhole, and this is the 3 wormhole. So you see differences in the exploration trajectory that people are using, or different strategies for moving through these environments. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about with respect to non-Euclidean navigation, non-Euclidean spaces. So I was unaware of this literature until I found it the other day. It's only 2 papers, but I think people are moving in this direction now that we have virtual environments that can actually render these in an explorable way. People can actually do these kind of experiments. It's interesting how the ecological psychologists have picked up on this, and so it's interesting stuff.
I saw Koslin there in the references, and there's I don't know what you want to call it, spatial cognition.
Yeah.
That was that was really, or again, I remember that being a staple of undergrad psych or cognitive science, like that understanding that the time to turn an object could be measured, and it reflected the reaction times that you had on these cosmic tasks, right? And like we were saying earlier, these VR worlds allow you to change all sorts of things, right? But as well as we've just, it's gotten easier to allow people to navigate things, right, in game worlds, as opposed to actually setting up a labyrinth. And like super valuable. And so those are really interesting thoughts, or ideas on that. I will say that there's also a long history of non-Euclidean visual science. So and again, like the anyway, it's something, again, like I would say it's, super interesting papers. There is reasons to believe that our visual system itself is not necessarily always best modeled in a Euclidean sense.
Yeah.
And I dropped just a note in the chat, because there is just made me think of this particular game. I think it's available on the App Store, that allows you to manipulate like higher dimensional objects, and I can get it from the geometric algebra community in terms of what that app was called.
Oh yeah.
But it might be something to think about, just in terms of, again, seeing, allowing people to use Euclidean intuitions, but to perhaps connect them to cognitive models that can extend beyond those. Or, again, I'm not sure what I'm saying there, but like math is math does allow you to escape non-Euclidean models, as well as just really interesting, without going to VR worlds. I think they're called Foncret circles, but it's what we used. It's what we used at St. John's to, when you're studying like Lobachevsky or Bolle, and you're looking. It allows you to do proofs, but in a circle, like because you can't represent these non-Euclidean things, you have this 2D projection to a circle that where we did proofs in a Euclidean way, or in a theorem driven way, but we did them with this circle. So it was like, if the lines didn't intersect on it, then they were parallel, but they could be, they could like have any angle. It was just an interesting, like thinking about how Euclidean maps and cognitive models don't necessarily have to, can be connected.
Yeah, I know. Definitely, like in mathematics research or in education, you want to be able to have people understand these spaces, and it's hard to do unless you have really good visualizations, because and so we can do that much better if we can have people navigate through them or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, like one, it could be that there's diversity in how people.
Right.
But I as one who, like, I need geometric intuitions.
Yeah.
I remember going through linear algebra, and especially like computational linear algebra, like literally drawing rectangles to represent the matrices.
Yeah.
Like, that was like really helpful for getting into multi-way decompositions for me.
Yeah.
But I love those papers. I'm gonna check them out.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, in the chat we did have like Jesse said. So yeah, Morgan talked about the higher dimensional construct game, and then Jesse, yeah, I guess he said this is maybe from before. Also to mention briefly, maybe follow up on the Cognition Futures Warosh discussion on Varela podcast. One interesting point is that he listed 3 to 4 main influences on Varela. Outside of cybernetics, one was French literary or critical theory. And then going to the papers that we just talked about, ecological psych is interesting to think about here for sure. And then I wonder how that squares with world models. And I assume you mean like the non-Euclidean stuff, which is interesting because we think about world models. I guess we assume a Euclidean world, right?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, it's really interesting to consider in the papers. He said a bit about like something that may be representing specific maps, but otherwise it's sort of geometric. You think of a root, almost irrelevant to the world itself, and what are the mesh points between that and then having thing. And I try to even think about it in my own sense, like to be first person centered for a second. It's sort of like there's sort of a higher level, like I know where the highways in the state go from a certain top down imaginary view, but that's not really. It's sort of interesting to juxtapose that to when I'm trying to figure out where to actually go directly, like what's in front of me. And then it's really interesting another thing because it's now there's this really interesting mediated space. Like we're talking about virtual reality, but even like I guess you could kind of say to an extent, like looking at Google Maps on your phone or having it in the dashboard or whatever is sort of this mediated augmented reality. Like are you it kind of is interesting to see what's more important. Like are you actually more invested in what's on the map or what's on the road? Like you have to kind of rotate between what is happening, to move the car in a sort of specific fine-tuned ways. But then I don't know, it's different because I recently, like I don't drive as much a car anymore, and a lot of times I do now. It's with navigation to go somewhere, but it's different than like finding your way to a new place that you don't have any. If you're finding your way to a new place and you don't have a GPS, that's a very different experience than like everything else. When that used to be the normal all the time, that used to be the way to go. You'd maybe have my dad had the old road map. You actually pull it out, like the actual physical maps. What's that, And so yeah, there's a lot there. I thought I was gonna have to go, but I think I can say a little more. I just wanted to say quickly also, the Cognition Futures pilot fellowship is out. It's something that I talked about a lot last year, and it's not anything that impressive. It's more of a trial run, but it is on the Joe Pro website, and I post a link in the chat if people are curious about it.
Okay.
It's mostly just about everything we're already doing, just trying to dress it up a bit more for certain things to do. But that's cool. But I kind of want to dovetail the non-Euclidean talk with. I really would like to. I don't know what way it's going to fall out, but I'd really like to kind of go into, like in the data science machine learning Slack channel. There's been talk about like the Minecraft stuff. There's been talk about this crap with VR. There's been talk about this stuff with regard to VR. And I feel like I don't really know what, but I really like to do a project in this space. I know Hussein showed a lot of interest too, maybe in preparation for Google Summer of Code later in the year. But I feel like there's some, I don't know what to say other than I hope we kind of keep talking about this sort of either virtual reality outright or simulation and computer related stuff, because I think that'd be a really good match for our group and also the interest too. So that's my vote for that, I guess.
All right.
The end.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, it's a good thing to follow up on. All right. Well, thanks for joining, and keep on going in Slack and in the Discord channels, and see you around this week.
All right. See you next time.
See you later.
Take care.